The morning sun spilled through the oaks, painting golden patches on the sidewalks of Willow Creek, a neighborhood where pristine lawns and polished mailboxes hid a simmering tension. Dvyd, a single father, walked hand in hand with his son, Ethan, their therapy dog, Max, padding loyally beside them. Ethan, whose autism made the world a kaleidoscope of overwhelming sensations, found solace in Max's steady presencia furry anchor in a sea of chaos. They were headed to the HOA center, a mundane errand to grab newsletters, but in Willow Creek, nothing was ever quite as simple as it seemed. Dvyd's heart was cautious, scarred by the neighborhood's undercurrents of judgment. The HOA, led by Margaret, a woman whose name was synonymous with ironclad rules, governed with the precision of a drill sergeant. Her decrees on hedge heights, paint colors, even dog breeds were law, and her reputation for enforcing them was as unyielding as the summer heat. As Dvyd and Ethan approached the center, Margaret emerged, her steps clipped, her eyes narrowing at Max with a disdain that felt personal. "Your dog's been digging up the flower beds again," she snapped, her voice slicing through the morning calm. "This is the last straw." Dvyd's jaw tightened. "That's impossible," he said, his tone steady but edged with defiance. "Max has been with Ethan all morning. He doesn't wander." Margaret's lips curled, dismissing his words as if they were dust on her pristine clipboard. Then, in a move that stunned the gathering neighbors, she bent down, snatched a rock from the path, and hurled it at Max. The stone arced through the air, a calculated act of aggression that seemed to freeze time. Max, with instincts honed by loyalty, sidestepped the missile, his ears pinned back, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The crowd gasped, murmurs swelling into a chorus of disbelief. Dvyd pulled Ethan close, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and protectiveness. Max wasn't just a pet, was Ethan's lifeline, his calm in a world that often felt like a storm. Margaret stood defiant, her fists clenched, as if daring anyone to challenge her. The onlookers' shock morphed into indignation, their whispers growing bolder. This wasn't just about a doge, it was a crack in the facade of Margaret's reign, a moment that exposed the cost of her obsession with order. Dvyd's eyes locked with hers, blazing with a fire he hadn't known he possessed. The air crackled with tension, a prelude to something bigger, something inevitable. By evening, the incident had spread like wildfire, whispered in driveways and debated over fences. Neighbors, long silenced by Margaret's rule, began to share their own stories: fines for minor infractions, threats over trivialities. The rock-throwing wasn't just an attack on Max. It was a symbol of a community suffocated by control. Dvyd, reluctant but resolute, found himself at the center of this quiet rebellion. Neighbors approached him, their voices low but urgent, offering support and grievances. "She's gone too far," said Mrs. Larson, her eyes fierce. "We're with you." Margaret, undeterred, doubled down. Memos flooded mailboxes, each one sharper than the last, reinforcing her vision of a flawless neighborhood. But her words, once unquestioned, now fueled dissent. Private conversations turned into plans, a spark of resistance growing into a flame. Dvyd, though wary of conflict, felt the weight of his neighbors' trust. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs. The next day's HOA meeting was electric, the community hall packed with restless energy. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of anticipation as residents faced the board, Margaret at its helm, her notes stacked like a fortress. Dvyd entered with Ethan and Max, their presence drawing nods from allies and glares from loyalists. Ethan clutched Max's leash, the dog's calm anchoring him amidst the room's unease. The meeting began with routine matters, but the air shifted when the floor opened to discuss the dog incident. Voices erupted, raw and unfiltered. Mrs. Carter stood, her voice trembling with years of frustration. "I was fined for a shrub that grew an inch too tall. This isn't a neighborhood, it's a prison." Applause thundered, a wave of defiance that rattled Margaret's composure. But not all agreed. Mr. Hayes, a staunch supporter, rose. "Rules protect our property values," he said, his voice firm but faltering. Without them, we'd have chaos. De Vyd listened, his silence deliberate, gauging the room's pulse. Margaret seized the moment, her voice cutting through the din. Standards must be upheld, she declared, her gaze flicking to de Vyd. Exceptions breed disorder. Her words, cold and dismissive, ignited something in de Vyd. He stood, his voice clear, slicing through the tension. This isn't about standards, he said. It's about compassion. Ethan needs Max. We all have needs. Why should we sacrifice them for rules that hurt more than they help? His words landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting nods and murmurs of agreement. Margaret's face tightened, but the room was shifting, minds opening to a vision of community over conformity. The debate stretched on, a tug-of-war between fear of change and hunger for it. No resolution came that night, but the seeds of rebellion had been sown. Days later, de Vyd, Ethan, and Max returned to the HOA center, the memory of Margaret's aggression still raw. As they neared, Margaret appeared, her eyes glinting with renewed purpose. Her voice, sharp as ever, resumed its tirade. Pets like yours disrupt order, she said, oblivious to Ethan's tightening grip on Max's leash. The boy's breaths quickened, his anxiety rising like a tide. Max, sensing his distress, tensed, his instincts kicking in. What happened next was a blur. Max lunged, not with malice but with fierce loyalty, placing himself between Ethan and Margaret. His momentum, unstoppable, caught her off guard. She stumbled, arms flailing, and with a spectacular splash, plunged into the center's fountain. The courtyard fell silent, the sound of water echoing like a gavel. Neighbors froze, then gasped, some stifling laughter, others wide-eyed with shock. Margaret emerged, drenched and sputtering, her authority washed away with the fountain's ripples. De Vyd rushed to Ethan, shielding him from the chaos. Neighbors moved to help Margaret, their faces a mix of concern and irony. The moment was absurd, yet profound, a crack in the dam of her control. Whispers broke the silence, the incident already morphing into legend. Margaret's invincibility was shattered, her human frailty laid bare. The fountain plunge became a turning point. News spread, each retelling chipping away at Margaret's grip. Neighbors who once bowed to her now questioned her methods, emboldened by the absurdity of her fall. De Vyd, thrust into the spotlight, saw an opportunity. At a gathering that evening, he spoke to a crowd of curious faces. This isn't about a fountain, he said, his voice steady. It's about what we value. Ethan needs Max, just as we all need room to live, not just obey. His words resonated, reviewing a vision of a neighborhood united by empathy, not fear. The next HOA meeting was a reckoning. The hall buzzed with purpose, chairs filled with residents ready to act. Margaret, her presence diminished, struggled to rally support, but her words fell flat. De Vyd rose, his voice carrying the weight of a community's hopes. We can be more than rules, he said. We can be a place where everyone belongs. The room erupted in agreement, a tide turning against Margaret's reign. Votes were cast, policies rewritten. A new committee formed, tasked with balancing order and compassion. De Vyd, now a board member, led with quiet conviction, fostering programs that celebrated diversity and connection. Gardens bloomed, paths became places of conversation, and Max, once a target, became a symbol of resilience. Margaret faded into the background, her era over. The neighborhood thrived, not without challenges, but with a new spirit. De Vyd, Ethan, and Max walked its streets, no longer outsiders but part of a community reborn. What began with a rock and a splash had ignited a revolution, proving that even the smallest act of courage could ripple into profound change.